Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I wanted to just bring about a discussion video talking about the question, do authors owe their readers more books? This is a question and a topic that is talked about a lot on BookTube, especially in the fantasy genre, especially regarding certain authors in the fantasy genre. And there are some people who come on the side that the answer is no, they do not owe the audience, and then there are some who come on the idea of saying yes, they do owe the audience. I have a position that I would like to lay out in this video. I'd love to hear your position and your thinking and your logic behind this. Please leave those kind of comments and discussion down below. But it actually, I think, is a bit more nuanced and should be looked at a case-by-case basis, because there are some things that are in authors' hands and some things that aren't. So to begin this discussion, I want to list the authors and book series that I'm going to talk about, and then I want to go through them individually and analyze the situation, because I think individual situations are important for this. So the first author to talk about is Patrick Rothfuss. Now, Patrick Rothfuss is known for writing The Name of the Wind and The Wise Man's Fear. This is two books in the trilogy called The Kingkiller Chronicles, which, by the way, I intend to read very soon. A lot of people on BookTube talk about this trilogy. But book one came out in the late 2000s, and book two came out, I believe, in 2011. So as I'm recording this in 2023, that means it's been roughly 11 to 12 years since the last entry in the series was published. Now, Rothfuss has written a few, like some children's picture books. I think he wrote two novellas, one of them which is scheduled to come out recently, but he has not been writing novels. And the third book that he's promised, Doors of Stone, just has not released after a decade, over a decade of waiting. Now, there can be things that happen in people's lives that prevent them from being able to write. There are things in people's lives that, make them more busy. But with how much Rothfuss puts an emphasis on his audience and on, doing live streams with people and doing videos and talking about the series and pushing people to read more of the series and buy more of the series and participate in charity events for the series, he pushes the audience, the fandom, to be involved. And so when you have a situation like that, in my mind, yes, you are encouraging people to get involved in your series. You owe them a conclusion to that series if you can. Now, things happen in life. You get delays, but 12 years is I think, an unreasonable amount of wait time for a series. And I know that he has flowery prose and he's really detailed on some of his writing, but it does not take 12 years to be able to write books. And so this is an instance of where I think it is completely owed. So yes, in this instance. The second instance is talking about, I think everyone knows what I'm going to talk about secondly, and this is George Martin. I have more nuance coming in later on. But George Martin wrote the A Song of Ice and Fire books, which were super popular and were turned into the Game of Thrones series. And so the last of those books was A Dance with Dragons, which came out in 2011, right about the time that the TV show released. I know one person who works in editing at a publisher adjacent to this one, and the editor said they basically had to strap him down to convince him to finish the book in time for the TV show, or this one wouldn't even gotten turned in. But it's been 12 years, and the next book in the series, Winds of Winter, still hasn't come out, and there's still scheduled another book after that called Dance with Dragons. And constantly, George Martin promises, I'm working on the series, I'm working on the series, I'm working on the series. But he has not turned it in. In fact, he took the time to write this, 700-page book, Fire and Blood, which is the basis for the TV show House of the Dragon. Now, I loved House of the Dragon. I'm super excited to read this book. It looks pretty good. I have some friends online who have read it and loved it. And I'm really excited for season 2 of the show to come out. But between working on that show, working on other shows he's done, he has had plenty of time and opportunity to finish up the final books in his series, which he's been promising. This is an instance where it's especially owed to the audience, in my opinion, not just because of the fandom reasons that I talked about before, but also because he's promised on numerous occasions that he would work on it. Now, do I actually think it's going to happen? No. But this is an example of, do you want your audience to be happy with you? Do you want your audience to be satisfied, to continue buying your books? Martin put out this one. There's supposed to be a second book on this Fire and Blood series. You expect audiences to keep buying your adjacent books, but you don't expect them to, but you aren't expected to finish out the original series that got them interested. That's just a very difficult situation, and to me, it seems like Martin should just come out and finish the novels. So that's my instance with Martin. The third person I'll talk about is David Farland, who is known for writing the Rune Lords series. This is an interesting example because there are some nuances that happen with this series. The first thing is that David Farland had some health issues in his family that he had to deal with that delayed him. He wrote 8 books in the series, The Rune Lords. The final book that came out in 2008 was called, or I think it's 2008, Chaos Bound. I'm going to check just to make sure I'm right about my year, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. 2009, I'm sorry, 2009, so 14 years ago, was Chaos Bound. And the books had started really big and had been getting shorter, but he wanted the final book that he was titling A Tale of Tales to be a really big epic book. And he continued kind of kicking the can down the road. And the audience didn't really stick with him. Once it was obvious that he wasn't going to finish in time, the audience pretty much has stopped talking about the Rune Lords online, which is really sad because it's one of my favorite fantasy novels series of all time. And sadly, David Farland did pass away in early 2022. And now I know people close to the David Farland family who have said that they're working on it. The final book, they're doing preparations for it. So it might still come out. But it's taking time to do so. And this is an instance where I still believe that Farland should have focused on this, but I also know that some things came up that actually prohibited from doing this. But also there's some questions about, death comes sometimes. And so it's unfortunate and it's sad that Mr. Farland died, but so you have to balance that a little bit. So there's a little bit of slack, at least in my opinion, with him, especially since it looks like the final book will be released, just sadly not written by him. Then the fourth author, and this is the final fantasy series I'll talk about, is The Wheel of Time. Now, this is the most unique series on the list because Robert Jordan, from when he started writing it and publishing in around 1990, all the way through his death in 2007 or 2008, he was constantly turning in books every 1 to 2 years. I think the final book, let me check to see what year it came out. The final book, Knife of Dreams, came out in 2005, but he continued writing and writing and writing, trying to fit in as many books as he could and tried to complete it as much as he could. And I know that he wrote outlines for the end of the series, and he worked really hard to deliver them. Now, of course, he also sadly died, but he left so much outlines and detailed information that his estate was able to hire another author, Brandon Sanderson, who's now the top fantasy author at the moment, to finish out the series, which he did. He split the final book into 3 books because of how big it got. But he wrote the books The Gathering Storm, Towers of Midnight, and A Memory of Light. Now, this is an example of I am so glad that Brandon Sanderson did this and that Robert Jordan's widow allowed for this, because these are, in my opinion, the best books in the Wheel of Time, but also because it gave the audience and the books itself closure and a proper ending. And it was still generally based on what Robert Jordan wanted the ending to happen. So this is an example of, we know that things happen in life, but Robert Jordan actually continued writing up until his death, and he was consistent about it. It's not like he would write a book and then leave 10 years, and then write a book and then leave 10 years. He was consistently turning in books in the Wheel of Time. And so he's an example of, I feel like he did owe the authors or the readers, but he actually delivered and he worked hard up until his death. turning them in. And so the final instance, and this is the one that I think I'm going to anger people the most, and that is I'm going to talk about a Star Wars instance of books that never got turned in. Back in the late 2000s, early 2010s, we had the big Fate of the Jedi series come out for Star Wars, which was a 9-book series by 3 authors, Aaron Alston, Christy Golden, and Troy Denning. Fantastic authors. I'll be reading that series very soon. But after that series was completed, Del Rey, the publisher who did the Star Wars novels, had planned to do a book that Christy Golden was going to write that was going to be called Sword of the Jedi. It was actually going to be a trilogy. And that was promised, and then right after that book was promised to fans, or at least the information was released to fans that it would happen, Disney Disney bought Lucasfilm, and they changed their canon plans, and they started over the canon, and so they were no longer writing new Legends novels. They finished releasing the ones they had in the can, like Kenobi. Thank goodness they released that book. That was an amazing book. But they weren't writing anymore. And so the Sword of the Jedi trilogy never came. Now, this is an instance of where I believe Christy Golden, the author, does not owe the fans anything because it's out of her control. She is at the whims of the publishing industry, specifically with the bosses, the owners of the IP. And since the owners of the IP have said, we're not doing any more of these Legends books, they did not, give her a contract to complete this trilogy. She's just not. Now, she's gone on to do other Star Wars books. But I don't bear Christy Golden any ill will because she worked as long as she could, and then, they didn't allow her to complete them. And so it's not her fault. Now, this then becomes the argument, does the publisher, or rather does Lucasfilm, does Star Wars owe its fans that Sword of the Jedi trilogy that it was promised? It's a little complicated. I think in one instance, if you're going to promise things like that, you need to deliver on them. But at the same time, even the people that had promised that, it's even out of their hands a little bit because of the decision about canon. And so the decision was made not to publish them, and they went in a new direction with the canon novels. And so the EU didn't have proper closure. It had Crucible, which was kind of a final book, but not enough for a lot of fans. And so the EU Legends fans feel jilted that they didn't get that final book. And I totally understand why they feel that way. I think that I come from it from a different perspective, since I didn't even read the Legends books or even start until after the sale had already happened and they'd already been rebranded as Legends. And so even though I love the Legends line, and I actually think it's more entertaining than the canon line, generally speaking, I think that I don't feel the connection that the audience has regarding the necessity of publishing these books. And so, I get that the publisher should have, but at the same time, things happen in the publishing industry. It would be one thing with these other authors, like if George Martin's publisher dropped him and said, you're not allowed to publish with us anymore, and no one was accepting his book anywhere. That's kind of a difficult, you can't, that's kind of a difficult situation. Now, technically, he could self-publish, but that's not the same thing. But the publisher still wants him. This publisher is still encouraging him to turn in those final books. Same with Patrick Rothfuss. So it's with the Sword of the Jedi trilogy, I'm kind of like mixed on it. I don't think that the author owes it, and I don't even think the publisher owns it, because there's only so much they can do. I'll only say that they should have taken the time to finish out the Legends line. They should have said, all right, we know that we're switching to canon. Let's speed up the work on this trilogy, get it out right now, back in like 2012, 2013, really wouldn't have been 2012, when 2013, so that they can finish the Legends line, give it a nice bow, clean everything up. That's not what happened, so it becomes more complicated. if you have thoughts on these books, whether it's the fantasy novels I talked about, the Star Wars novels, whatever your thoughts are, let me know down in the comments section down below. Do you think that the authors owe it to their fans, or do you think that, no, they're creatives? A lot of people argue that creatives, don't owe you anything, that it's just you're doing it to be creative. But for a lot of creatives, it's a business and it's part of their income. But also, if you have a fandom, you owe you've gotten people to invest their time into reading your books. It's only logical that you should complete them if you have the ability to. So that's where I land on this issue. If you have an opinion, let me know down in the comments below. Please subscribe to the channel with lots of videos talking about books and other things. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.